Hello, welcome to this workshop. This is the Counselling Theory and Character Creation workshop. And today I'm going to be covering how counselling and mental health theory can provide the basis for character backstory, behaviours and feelings. So what we're going to be covering today, I'll do a little introduction for you just to tell you a little bit about myself. And then I'm going to be jumping into attachment theory as the first element that we'll be covering. We'll then be moving on to transactional analysis, which is a counselling theory. And finally, we'll be concluding with looking at trauma in childhood and adverse childhood experiences. So, who am I? I'm Lucy A. McLaren. I'm a fantasy author, and my debut book is coming out on the 1st of May, and that is Awakening the Communion's Curse, Book 1. But I'm also a professional counsellor. I have a first-class BA honours degree in counselling and have experience working mainly with children and young people. And I have a keen interest basically in how these two areas overlap. As a writer, I really find it interesting how I can use the theories that I learned when I was doing my counselling qualification and my experiences working with people, how I can intertwine these into the stories that I'm telling, and making those character backstories and making the characters actually believable, realistic people. I think when I'm creating a story, I like to go into it and wonder, why is this character how they are? What has happened to them in their past? How was their childhood? What was their relationship like with those around them? And what does that mean for how they are in the story as we find out more about them? And that's kind of, what brings me here today is that I'd like to show you how you can use these elements and create those far more padded out character backstories. And for you, hopefully, with more of an understanding of the mental health elements that can come into this, and the different things that can impact on us growing up that then can cause certain thoughts, feelings and behaviors, and it kind of creates that understanding of character motivation, I think. So yeah, that is about me, and that's what brings me here to this workshop today. Hopefully you'll find it helpful. And just to let you know, this is a pre-recorded element, this workshop section, but there will be a live Q&A after this. So please do take note of any questions you have, of any parts that come up, anything that I'm talking about, and I'll do my best to answer those in the live Q&A section at the end once the workshop is finished. So let's talk about attachment theory first of all. You may have heard of this one. This was one when I went into training. I was kind of familiar with it. I didn't know a huge amount, but I'd heard of attachment theory and John Bowlby. But he was a psychoanalyst, and he believed that early childhood held the answers for many mental health and behavioural issues later in life. And he described attachment as a lasting psychological connectedness between human beings. So what is a psychological connectedness? That's basically the key to determining the type of attachment a child will develop with their main caregiver. And Bowlby outlined that a child must connect and have a reliable relationship with one primary caregiver within the first 2 years of their life in order to create a secure base, and from which they can then go and explore the world around them. They feel safe and able to explore, and they've got that base they can always return to. Without that secure base, Bowlby actually theorized in his maternal deprivation hypothesis, the child could suffer from long-term negative consequences in their cognitive, social and emotional development. And just a note here, it is called the maternal deprivation hypothesis because Bowlby believed that the main caregiver should be the mother. This was very much of its time. It was a theory created in the 50s and 60s when, the family unit was seen as mum is at home looking after the children, dad is going to work and not so involved with the children. So just bear that in mind. These days it is more open, hopefully anyway, we're more open-minded in terms of the main caregiver of a child does not have to be the mother, but that is just why it's called the maternal deprivation hypothesis. From my point of view, I'm talking about any caregiver the child may have, whether that's parents, whether that's grandparents, whoever is the main person raising a child in the first years of their life. And just a little note to add here, attachment theory is way more in depth than what I'm going to be going into today. I can't cover everything, every aspect of it. I'm giving you the basics. I'm giving you hopefully a tool that can allow you to go away and utilize it when you're creating your own characters. But if you want to read up more around attachment, I'm going to recommend some books a little bit later on that you can have a look at, and they will give you a little bit more, well, far more information than I have today in this workshop. But just to let you know, these are the basics of attachment theory, but there's so much more that you can learn if you're interested. So the attachment styles is really what I'm going to be focusing on in terms of how you can use attachment theory to create your character's backstory. Attachment styles were actually identified by Ainsworth and Bell. Ainsworth was worked with Bowlby previously, and she wanted to continue on with his work and build on it. And she and Bell created this strange situation study, which is something that is, again, worth reading around. You can look on YouTube, actually, and there's the videos you can watch of the study, how they did it, observing the children. It's interesting. I found it very interesting to watch. So if that's something that you want to check out, then do head on over to YouTube and have a look. But Ainsworth and Bell identified 3 attachment styles, and the 4th was added by Main and Solomon, who followed up on the strange situation study. So what attachment styles are there? So there's 4, as I've mentioned, and I'm going to break these down. If we go attachment type, we'll go through what the parent-child relationship would have looked like, what the childhood behaviours look like, and then what the adulthood behaviours look like. So first of all, we've got secure attachment. The relationship with the caregiver would have been what will be deemed very much as a healthy relationship, that this child has got a caregiver who is compassionate, who is able to cope with their own emotions and therefore teach their child about emotional regulation and how to deal with emotions as and when they come up. The caregiver sees their children as separate from themselves, and therefore it's essential that they meet their child's needs. They're not just thinking, I must meet my own needs, irrelevant of what the child is needing. They are seeing that child as a separate entity, and therefore understanding that is essential to meet their child's needs. So what does this create for the child? It creates behaviours that show they're content to separate from their parent and explore the world. It's that safe base that Bowlby talked about. Their parent is a source of comfort when they're afraid, and they will seek reassurance from their parent, and they will receive that reassurance. They will be happy to see their parents when they return if they've left the house for any reason, and they will show preference to parents over strangers. In adulthood, what will this look like for this person? Well, they're likely to have long-term trusting relationships with others. They're likely to have higher self-esteem, feel more open about their sharing their feelings and open about them to others, and they're going to have a higher chance of having a supportive social circle because they have built those healthy relationships with other people. They know how to talk about their feelings, they know how to communicate in a more healthy way, and they're going to feel more secure in their relationships and trusting of their partner. So that is a secure attachment. The next one we're looking at is insecure avoidant. So with this one, the caregiver is likely to meet their child's basic needs, but they're unlikely to be able to meet the emotional needs of the child because they actually lack the ability to deal with their own emotions effectively. So they don't know how to meet their child's emotional needs, and they don't know how to teach their child how to regulate and cope with their emotions. And so the child therefore grows up unable to cope when they're feeling different emotions and unable to regulate them. And because they've had no blueprint from their caregiver, they haven't been told, okay, if you feel angry, this is what you can do, this is what you can say. So they just don't know how to deal with those kind of emotions. As a child, they may avoid their parents. They may tend to avoid contact with and don't seek comfort from their parents, so that their parent isn't a source of reassurance or comfort like it is for a securely attached child. And they show little or no preference for their parents over strangers. Growing up into adulthood, this person may be independent and feel that they will only take care of themselves, that they're just focused on inwardly, basically, and not on the relationships with other people, that because they're actually going to be likely to fear or struggle with intimacy, and feel that neediness in others is actually very off-putting. They avoid investment of emotion in relationships with others, whether that be romantic or platonic, and can appear distant or closed off. They will struggle to share their thoughts and feelings with others, and they'll be dismissive of their partner and their feelings. And this again you can go see how that goes back to how they were treated by their caregiver as a child. Their emotions were not met, their emotional needs were not met, and they were basically taught that if you show your emotions, you're not going to get any kind of assistance or comfort from another person. So why do that? They're going to close them off, and they're going to feel like that's the only effective way of dealing with emotions, is to shut them out. So the next attachment type is the insecure, ambivalent, or anxious. And this one, the caregiver is going to be a little bit unreliable, basically. They're going to be sometimes available for their child and sometimes not. They may be intermittently rewarding. They may be receptive at times to their child's needs, whether that be emotional or physical, but then all of a sudden they can be shut off, unavailable, and they are basically these caregivers. They can seek to have their own needs met by their child, rather than the other way around. So ultimately they're draining their child, because they're focusing on their own needs rather than the child's, and this leaves the child feeling quite anxious around the caregiver, but also quite clingy towards them. The child is unable to have their emotional needs met, but they still are going to seek that from their parent, because that is a natural instinct, is to seek comfort from the parent, but that parent's actually draining them at the same time. The behaviours for this child will be that they're wary of strangers. They become very distressed at their parents' departure, but then are not comforted when their parent returns. Going into adulthood, this person will struggle to become close to others, may question whether their partner loves them, have difficulties with trust. They may become fixated on their partner relationships and struggle with boundaries, likely to have low self-esteem, requiring lots of reassurance, and will be devastated by relationships ending. And the final attachment style is insecure, disorganized. This one, the caregiver is likely to be frightening to their child, that may be abusive, show a lot of anger, violence. They may act erratically, being extremely happy one moment and playing with the child, but then actually going really quickly, snapping and going to rage or anger in a heartbeat. This leaves the child with no understanding or strategy as to how their needs can be met. They need their caregiver for safety, but ultimately are terrified of them. For this child, their behaviour is likely to be, as it says here, the result of trauma or abuse. They'll show a combination of the avoidant and resistant attachment style behaviours. So we've got, like we've seen here, distressed at the parents' departure but not comforted by the parents' return, avoiding contact with and not seeking comfort from parents, avoid their parents. So it's a combination of those two previous ones that we looked at. And actually they may be very dazed, confused, or apprehensive because of the unpredictability of their caregiver's behavior. In adulthood, they're going to have a similar behaviors to the avoidant attachment type. So that's this one here. So they're going to be independent, taking care of themselves, fearing intimacy, appearing distant and closed off to others. They may struggle to find an emotional balance, maybe controlling, display jealousy, or be abusive towards their partner. They may desire relationships with others, but are unable to seek them out because they actually expect to be rejected, and they believe themselves to be unworthy of being loved. So those are the 4 attachment styles. As an exercise, I would say perhaps you could go through, you've got all 4 of them there set out in this table, and you could have a go at creating a character for each attachment style. Imagine what their childhood was like, what their relationship with their parents were like, the types of behaviors they would have shown as a child, and the types of behaviors they might show now into adulthood based on that attachment style. So I've actually gone ahead and created a character here. As a fantasy author, of course, I had to go for a fantasy antagonist. Excuse me. So this is Guy McEvilman. He wants to take over the world, of course, to hold all the ancient magical powers, and whilst doing so to oppress a whole group of people. That's quite extreme, but that's often what we see in fantasy stories. So it's, for me, I wanted to look at this and go, okay, why? You can have antagonists, you can have people who appear to be evil or just inherently bad. But actually, for me, as a counsellor, as someone who studied mental health and counselling theory, I wanted to say, okay, so this is how they are now in this story, but why is that? What's led to this? And so I used attachment theory here, and we're looking at, so imagine that as a child, Guy's main caregiver was erratic, sometimes happy and playful, but they had a short temper, which led to incredible rages. They shouted and screamed at Guy and often hit him as a way of disciplining his obedience. This is basically an insecure, disorganized attachment style. As a child, Guy may have been confused and anxious, constantly seeking reassurance and safety from a frightening, unpredictable parent. And as an adult, he likely fears intimacy, struggles to cope with his emotions, may be controlling of or abusive towards any partner, will fear rejection in his relationships, and may believe himself unworthy of love. When he was young, Guy felt himself drawn towards dark magic. Having witnessed its use by a travelling wizard as a child, Guy saw the power it could give him and the control over others he could hold. For someone who experienced a lack of control in his childhood, this may be very appealing to him. Though Guy longs for love and connection with others, as all humans do, his fear of rejection means he pushes those close to him away. He's quick to anger and has a violent temper. The fact that his behaviour pushes others away reinforces his own belief that he is unworthy of being loved. That dark magic with its power and sense of control grows all the more enticing. As he grows older, Guy's choice of power over relationships and connections with others grows stronger. So he would rather hold that dark magic and have that power that it gives him than have relationships with others. Why risk the pain of love when he can have the reassurance and control that dark magic gives him? So that was kind of hopefully you get the idea. This is based on the insecure, disorganized attachment style, as I said. And it was really for me about looking at, okay, the antagonist I've created here, he's not just bad or evil just because, like, he wasn't born evil. He behaves as he does because of deeply ingrained feelings, thoughts, and behaviours that are rooted in his childhood experiences and the attachment style he had with his caregiver. I do hasten to add here that obviously not everyone with this kind of attachment style is going to turn out to be an evil antagonist in a fantasy story. Of course, these are extremes. You can have people who are not trying to take over the world, who have insecure, disorganized attachment styles. But for me, as a fantasy writer, it's going to go to more extremes like this, and that's that's what interests me, is how can you not justify, but kind of explain why someone may be like this. And it doesn't matter what genre you write in, really. You can use these attachment styles and think about what your characters are going to look like in terms of past experiences and how that paints them as a person, as they are in the story that you're telling. So these are some books I would recommend reading if you want to find out more about attachment theory. They're excellent books, and they'll give you kind of a deeper look at attachment theory and how it can impact upon us. Why Love Matters in particular is a very good book, and delves into the different types of attachment that we've looked at, and all the various different outcomes there can be for individuals experiencing these attachment styles. And these are references that I've used today. So in case you want to check out any of these as well, here they are. Okay, so next up we have transactional analysis. So this it's often shortened to TA. And again, this is a theory made up of many different aspects. I'm going into two today, two parts of TA, but there are so many facets to it. Again, it's one that if you find it interesting what I'm talking about today, I would highly recommend reading up on it. And I'll give you that book list for this at the end of this section. So, created by Eric Byrne, TA was described as a unified system of individual and social psychiatry. It's a theory of psychopathology that offers a range of explanations for our behaviours based upon the experiences we have growing up. So this is another one that's looking at childhood experiences and looking at the potential outcomes for us as adults based on those experiences. And as I said, I'm going to be looking at two particular aspects of TA, and those are life position and life script. So first one we're going to look at is life position, which is within TA. It refers to the ways in which a person views themselves in their own lives when compared to others. And there are 4 life positions which are set out in the OK Corral, which is pictured here. And Harris, 1973, argued that from an early stage in life, every child believes themselves to be in the I'm not okay position, which you can see on the left here, while their parents are in the you're okay position. However, depending on their circumstances and the environment in which they grow up, this can change. So, worth bearing in mind. So, people are born in the I'm not okay position, and that can change depending on experiences. So we're going to go into life script here, and then I'll pull the two together. An individual's life script is, according to Byrne, a plan made in childhood, reinforced by the parents, justified by subsequent events. So the life script is completed by the age of 7, but it does continue to be built upon until the age of 12. And it's also influenced by cultural factors. So it's not just relationship with parents, it's also environment and the culture which an individual is surrounded by that goes towards building this life script. And it's basically a life script is structured from the way we see the world as children and creates a narrative that we will potentially follow for the rest of our lives. And I'll also note here that it's often unconscious. So we are not aware of this life script that is playing out. And that's actually a way that you can change a life script, is by becoming conscious of it and actually realizing that you're playing through this script over and over again. As soon as you become conscious of that, it becomes a lot easier to change it. If you're unconscious of something, you're just going to keep doing it over and over again because you just don't know that you're doing it. So I'm going to break down 2 more areas of life script, which is, first of all, injunctions. These contribute towards the individual's life script. and are prohibitions or negative commands from a parent. And they are messages individuals receive in early childhood from their parents or caregivers, including don't feel, don't belong, don't make it, don't exist, don't be important, don't be close, don't think, don't be well, don't grow up, don't be a child, and don't be you. So think about what injunctions your characters might have had imposed on them as children. Were they told not to be themselves by their parents' behaviours or comments towards them? Were they rewarded for showing childlike qualities and punished for showing more mature qualities? And so retain the belief they must be childlike to be of value. So that is injunctions. That's number one. Number two, we have counterinjunctions, which is also known as the counter script. And they're messages given in later childhood that basically tell an individual, you're okay if you meet these certain conditions. They work alongside and reinforce the individual's injunctions and comprise of 5 drivers, being be perfect, try hard, hurry up, please me or others, and be strong. So again here, have a think about what drivers your character might possess. We often have a primary driver with perhaps 1 or 2 that are slightly beneath that, and you can actually do tests. I'm sure if you Google what are my drivers, TA, you'll find a questionnaire that will tell you. Mine, I believe, was a mix between be perfect and please others. So I had these 2 that were quite a high score. It's interesting to have a look at the descriptions of what these mean. You may see some familiar kind of behaviors in yourself. So think about what of these might your character possess. Do they only seek to please others because of the expectations placed on them by their parents? Do they think they must be perfect in order to succeed in life? And like I said earlier, this is a big simplification of transactional analysis in general, but hopefully these give you some kind of little seeds that could grow into ideas for your characters. And that's all I want to do today. So what does the life position and life script mean for your character if we bring them together? I've created another character here. I've got, of course, another fantasy one. I've gone for the chosen one trope this time. And yeah, it's just kind of how do these all come together to contribute towards making that character backstory? So first of all, I started by thinking, okay, where is this character going to sit on the OK corral? This can be partially determined by their age and experiences growing up. But before I jump into this character here, I just want to say, like, according to TA, an individual will actually perpetuate behavioural patterns and beliefs about themselves by playing games. Now, games is a big part of TA that I haven't spoken about today. There's a book I recommend that I'll go and describe later on, but it details game playing and how important that is. But basically, games are ways that we interact with other people, and by playing them, we're preserving the integrity of the life position. So if we're in an I'm not okay life position, we're going to relate to other people and communicate with other people in a way that's going to preserve that life position and keep us in the I'm not okay position. Okay, so here's my character. Fiona Ordinary is a young girl living on a farm with her grandmother. She never knew her parents, and her grandmother has always been busy with the farm and somewhat distant. Fiona has never had a reliable parental figure and hasn't been taught her inherent value as a human. She therefore remains in the I'm not okay life position and places herself below others in terms of importance and value. Fiona's life script will be based upon this life position. She may believe herself unworthy of love because she has never been able to form a deep connection with those around her. Her grandmother has always expected her to simply get on with her work on the farm, to behave, and to keep quiet. She will repeat patterns based on her life script, contributed to by her injunctions and drivers, and will enter relationships with others that perpetuate her beliefs about herself and who she should be. Curveball: when Fiona is one day told that she is the chosen one, she may struggle to comprehend how this could be. For someone who's always seen herself as in the I'm not okay life position, she's going to really have a hard time coming to terms with this idea that she could be in some way special or destined to save the world. This leads her to struggle with her fate, to battle with her internal thoughts and feelings as she tries to process the changes in her life that do not fit into her life script. This will be difficult for her, but she can change her life script by becoming aware of it and challenging it. That's easier said than done often. Change is difficult for a lot of people, but I just wanted to show that this is a common trope in fantasy stories. And actually, what could that mean for someone? What kind of questions they're going to ask, how they're going to feel if they're suddenly told, actually, you are far more important than you've ever thought you are. And this is your destiny, and all this kind of stuff that you often see in fantasy stories. But, for you, if you don't write in fantasy, think about how an individual's life position, where do they put themselves on that? Do they put themselves in the I'm not okay position, or actually are they in the I'm okay, you're okay position, where they see themselves and others of equal value? They are able to communicate on a level with people and to have those open, healthy relationships with others. So here's some books if you want to read further about transactional analysis. As I mentioned, there's that Games People Play book by Eric Byrne. That's excellent for understanding game playing in more depth, because I've obviously only mentioned it today. I have not gone into detail about that at all. I'm okay, you're okay. We'll go into the life positions in far more depth, and then an introductory book to transactional analysis, which covers a lot more areas of the theory and maybe of interest to you if you're finding this you want to delve a little bit deeper into what we've spoken about today. And here's my reference list for this. Again, if you want to check any of these out, do go ahead, because these are all areas that I've referenced for this workshop today. And finally, we have trauma in childhood, adverse childhood experiences. These are otherwise known as ACEs. You may have heard of them if you work in social care or anything like that. But they are potentially traumatic events that occur in childhood up to the age of 17. And that can include neglect, abuse, addiction in the family, or mental illness in the family. So a original study into ACEs was carried out by Kaiser Permanente, hopefully not slaughtering that name, between 1995 and 1997. And from this study, they found that actually the higher an individual's ACE score, which is determined by the ACEs questionnaire that can be completed by individuals, the greater the risk of chronic disease, mental illness, violence, and being a victim of violence. The ACE questionnaire, which you can find online if you are interested in having a look at it, basically lists several traumatic events that can occur within an individual's childhood, each of which counts as one towards that overall score, no matter how often that event occurred. So here we have some statistics in terms of basically the ACE score and the overall likelihood that going into adulthood, an individual is going to suffer from or have problems in these areas. And the key number here is 4. If an individual has an ACEs score of 4 or higher, suddenly these risks increase massively. So we've got likelihood of becoming an alcoholic, suffering from chronic depression, having a serious problem working, having serious financial problems, chance of heart disease, or having a stroke. And you can see here how much more risk they are at because of these adverse childhood experiences they had. So what I'd like you to do here is have a look at your own character, create a character, and think about what they went through in their childhood. And although we've kind of mentioned a few different aspects of what makes up adverse childhood experiences, there are multiple factors, and ACEs don't have a single cause. They can have take different forms, and many factors contribute to ACEs. So it's worth having a look at that questionnaire because it will give you the more detail in terms of what makes up an ACE. But there's so many different factors contribute to them, including personality traits and experiences, parents, the family environment, and the community itself. So for your character, I haven't made one this time. It's your turn to give this a go. Create a character and think about what they went through in their childhood. Did they have any adverse childhood experiences? Think about the statistics. What could this mean for them? Are they depressed? Do they struggle with an addiction? Are they unwell? Do they struggle to focus on work or to be financially responsible? So all different aspects that could make up your character. You can think about their backstory and how that has led to them being how they are today. And that's only a brief one there for ACEs and trauma in childhood. But these are some more books to read if you want to go into more depth on these topics. So The Body Keeps the Score is an excellent book discussing trauma. Toxic Childhood Stress is one that goes into detail about ACEs. And The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog discusses different case studies carried out by Bruce Perry, who's a psychiatrist, and shows how the child trauma of each of these individuals impacted on them and the different outcomes there were and consequences there were for the experiences these children had. Sometimes a very difficult read, but also incredibly interesting and eye-opening in terms of what impact childhood trauma can have on individuals. So I highly recommend all of those books. And these are references for that section on ACEs and childhood trauma. So question time. Feel free to ask me anything about the workshop and I'll do my best to answer. And you are now going to see me live. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope this was helpful and I hope this is able to give you kind of a basic idea of how you can use these different theories when creating your character backstories. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care.